we begin today, I don't know how you begin your morning, but mine is that I'll make the coffee and then I turn on the TV to see what's happening in the news. And this morning to hear the news stories and the way news goes these days, they just keep on and on and on and on with it. And you hear about the shooting in El Paso, Texas, and then also last night in Dayton, Ohio. And the death toll that they have there, the injured, and all the things that go with it just grab at my heart, at least as I speak before you here today. I wish I could stand here this morning and give you the answer. And you know the answer. It's Jesus, of course, but I wish I could explain why these things happen and how it is that somebody comes to that point in their life where they think going about killing innocent people is an answer to something inside them. And it's not, of course, and mental illness, and you can go through all the other things that are a part of this, which today we don't know because we just don't know the details. But we have to wonder at how evil is working within this world and how Satan is beginning to take foothold in amongst people who are weak in this area and are led towards such a horrible act. We give thanks too today for our police officers, our law enforcement folks, and our first responders, and all those people who, instead of running away from the firing and the gunshots, goes toward them to make other people safe and to help them. I wish I had an answer for you, but I want to begin, at least today, and in the days to come, to have a conversation about that kind of violence and what it means to our Christian faith. And as we talk with one another, and as we look to scriptures, and as we share in that, maybe we can offer some comfort and some trust and faith that God is indeed good, even in a world that is not. So let's do that in the future days to come. And then let's just, in that meantime, let's be sure we're praying together for all those who are hurt and are experiencing grief because of that. Okay? Let's pray. Heavenly Father, you know this morning the deeds of evil within this world. You know, Lord, of all the heartache and the grief that people are experiencing right now, and then too their worry over people who are injured. We give you thanks, Lord, that you are the Lord of the universe, the God of all creation. We thank you, Lord, that you love us so much you gave us your Son, Jesus. And in this tough, difficult time, help us to be reminded of that love. And help us to understand what we should be doing and how it is we should respond. We give you praise this day in your holy name. Amen. Well, this morning, before I heard the news, my sermon, we're going to talk about what Jesus says in this gospel reading. The first words that begin here is somebody shouts out from the crowd. Kind of like that. It's kind of like being at one of the political rallies or something where there's hecklers or questions in the background, and they jump out and they say, "Lord, make my brother do this," and throws it out. And Jesus picks up on it and says, "Well, hey, you make me the judge or arbitrator in this." And he says, "You're missing the point, the larger point." And then he begins to say these words. He says, "Take care." That line, by the way, "take care" in this has an exclamation mark in English. And that means in the Greek that this is in the vocative case. I know I just love saying that because I actually learned one thing in Greek class. In the vocative case, which means that it is a command. It is like shouting. So take care, right? Take care of this. Jesus says, "Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. For one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions." Now, when you all hear that, how does that strike to your heart? The abundance of your possessions. First of all, you know that it's true, right? You go, "Well, of course, that's true." But we still like possessions, right? We still want those things very deeply, and often we long for having the new car or the new boat or the new home or the cabin on the lake, or you name the possession for which we want, for which Jesus warns us about the greed that leads us towards these things. Take care, he says. Be on guard. Amongst all the sins, greed doesn't get a whole lot of attention in and amongst us because it's kind of commonplace, for which we just say, yeah, whatever. The list of sins, the 7 deadly sins, you all got to memorize them. Wait, did I just go into a southern speak there? Yeah. You all got memorized there, don't you know? Yeah. You got lust and gluttony, of course, my favorite. Greed, sloth, wrath, envy, and pride. Greed being the one, I think, in our society, in our culture, that gets the least amount of attention. And so this morning I want you to ponder what it is that Jesus is warning us, this strong warning. It's not just a lighthearted, you should be careful. He says, be on guard. He says, watch on this. And as you hear it now within our cultural context, living here in the wealthiest country in the world, how is it that we see greed personally in your own life? Often it's not such a bad thing because it motivates us to succeed. It makes us work harder to achieve the things we want, to get what it is that we think is important. So how is it that greed becomes a bad thing for us? You're the ones that have to apply this. So why would Jesus warn you against these things today? To be on guard. You see, greed, if you look up the dictionary definition, is that it is an intense, selfish desire for something, especially wealth, power, food, or relationships. Now, how many of you have ever hung out with a room full of toddlers and a bunch of toys? Anybody ever see that happen? I have, actually, and right over here in this little room where we got these toys. And for some of the kids, once the eyes of adults and parents are a little bit distant from them, the nature of the human soul is such that when you see something you like, you go take it. And so even as the youngest of age, these innocent babes in arms, they'll go over and say, I like that block. Yank it away. For which the response is a scream, right? And no, I want that back. And so it goes. Well, just because they're toddlers doesn't mean it's not a human condition for which we as adults do as well. When we gather for worship, we come at that issue of greed a little bit because it's important for us to recognize how it is that we have the things that we have. So we say when we confess the Apostles' Creed, I believe in God the Father Almighty, what? Creator of heaven and earth. And in our faith, that means that we believe that God made everything that exists for which He gives to us as human beings so that we might be stewards of those items. So what we have is not ours, but we're just caretakers for a period of time within that. And then we get the part in our worship where we'll say the Lord's Prayer together. We get to that, give us this day our daily bread. Which means, again, that we confess that God provides for our every need, the food on our table, as we talk about it in that particular way. And yet, at the same time, we understand that as Christians, we still have that human sin deep within us that makes us want more, to want more things, to have it better. And in wanting that is not necessarily a bad thing, only that it provides the means by which the devil can use that against us to draw us away from God. To think that it is ours, that we have it, we own it, that we have control over it, rather than it being a gift from God above. Now, I have a little illustration to show you here, and I think you maybe have seen it before. It's from the movie Finding Nemo. Well, let's just watch it. I don't have to explain it. It doesn't matter. How many of you have seen Finding Nemo? Anybody?
Gerald, what is it? Fish got your tongue?
I gotta find my son Nemo!
It's that fish, you know, the one we've been talking about, the one that's been fighting the whole ocean. Hey, I know where you're selling. Huh? Hey, wait! The trucker! Stop!
He's going! He's crazy!
I got something to tell you!
Mike?
Okay, don't make any sudden moves. Hop inside my mouth if you want to live.
Hop in your mouth, huh? And how does that make me live? Mike?
Because I can take you to your son.
Yeah, right.
No, I know your son. He's orange. He's got a gimpy fin on one side.
That's it!
Fasten your seatbelts! Everybody hold on!
There you go, yeah. All those seagulls, as they see what they want, are saying, mine, mine, mine. And the pack mentality, or the flock mentality of the seagulls, is they're saying together, we want that, we want that, we want that. Mine, 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 it belongs to me. And you understand now what we're saying about this today is that it's not ours. It is what God has given us as a gift for which we take care of. We are the ones who manage that. Well, when we look at that, in a particular way around greed, we're breaking two commandments in particular, and our confirmation students know which two those are right away. 9 and 10, that's right, yeah. And so 9 and 10, which both have to do with coveting, yes, that's right, yeah, good job. For which, that is how, when we break those commandments, that's how greed comes into it as well. We are coveting, we are desiring and wanting something that does not belong to us. And so we work in any way possible to achieve that. Hebrews 13:5 says this, he says, let your conduct be without coveting. Be content in such things that you have. For he himself, Jesus has said, I will never leave you or forsake you. In other words, you will have all that you need in all of these things. So don't want, because I provide all that you will need. Well, there you go. This intense warning that Jesus gives us today, saying we should be on guard against greed, is to remind us once again that we are loved by God. And that love that we have from God has a purpose in how we serve others and how it is that we meet the needs of others. We have been given what we have in order to be used so that God can do the good works that God would do in the world. I know being a part of a group and being a part of relationships is a really important thing. And whether you belong to Peace Lutheran Church or a different church, belonging to a church and a Christ community is an important aspect of that. Belonging to a town like Watertown or Delano or Mayer or wherever it is you come from makes you a part of a relationship with a community of people. If you're in high school, if you remember back far enough into high school, you remember being a part of a group that was important to you. If you were in sports, being part of the team was a bigger part of that, wasn't there? At our high school, there was a group of guys who were all about fixing cars, and they had their own car, which made them cool, you know. And you wanted to be a part of that group, or sometimes the clothes you wear makes you a part of a group as well. Back a long time ago, when you weren't allowed to wear jeans to school. Can you imagine? And then when finally they broke the ground, he said, okay, you can wear jeans to school, but you can't wear Levi's. because Levi's, according to the custodian, have brass rivets in it for which you'll scratch the chairs. So jeans were an important identifier for that group. But then later on, it was bell bottoms. Who here is even in the category? Oh, okay, not long. All right, yeah, they're cool. How about a white belt? Did you wear a white belt? Yeah, I know. Nowadays, it would be what? Torn jeans. See, we tore jeans just because they wore out. You guys do it because it's fashion to wear those torn jeans. So you belong part of this group, part of this relationship and the like, and being a part of a church community helps you with charity and generosity towards others, for which we should be thankful today that Peace Lutheran is the kind of church that will do that kind of thing and helps us get away from that. Well, Jesus finishes his lesson for today then with this parable, this story of the rich fool. And there's a lot of different ways to talk about it. The one I like in particular is because of an author, a Christian author by the name of John Ortberg. Anybody read any John Ortberg books? One of his famous ones is that if you want to walk on water, you got to get out of the boat. That's one I like of his too. But this one is called It All Goes Back in the Box. And he tells this great story about his grandmother. And whenever he went to Grandma's house, they'd get together and they would play Monopoly. And his grandmother was a really good Monopoly player. And so they would play the game, and you know how the game goes. You start to acquire houses and then hotels, and you wait for the person to come along and land on your property, and then they gotta pay up and to do all that kind of thing. And it's a lot of fun. And young John Ortberg, he just loved playing with his grandma because his grandma was a bit of a cutthroat when it came to Monopoly. She took every dime she could. He'd say, well, how about, let me get around 200 so I can pay you up at that time. No. She'd just take everything. And she'd win almost every game. And there's this one time, though, after playing many years with Grandma, that he had it down, and he actually had Grandma on the ropes. She was down to her last bit of cash. She was coming around the one corner there and headed towards his Park Place and Boardwalk with hotels. And as she came onto that spot then, and sure enough, that's where she landed, right there on Boardwalk. And he got to say $400 something for that. Grandma didn't have it. She looked at him and he looked at her, and Grandma just took her arm and she swept all of the game into the box. She said to him this thing that was the inspiration for the book, and it was, when the game is over, it all goes back in the box. Well, that's true for the farmer today too, right? When it's all over, whatever you had goes back, and for us as well. And so we have to remember today that we are good stewards of what we've been given, because it's not ours. It's a gift that has been given to us from God to use for his good purposes. Amen? Amen. Let's stand. We're going to sing.